Hi, it's my favorite time of day, the time of day when I get to read a good book to you. Today we're going to read The Relatives Came, and it is by Cynthia Rylant, illustrated by Stephen Gammell. This is one of my very favorite books by one of my very favorite writers. I love her books. And I love the illustrations in this one because they just seem so happy and cozy. I want you to pay attention to the illustrations as we read this because they really add to the story. In the summertime, do you ever go visit any relatives? Maybe relatives come to visit you. I know that's one of my favorite things to do whenever I get a break from school. And this book reminds me a lot of visiting relatives that I have. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car, and in it they put an ice chest full of soda pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches, and up they came from Virginia. They left at 4 in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. Does it look like they're happy to be going? What do you think the illustrations do to make you think that they're happy to be going there? Doesn't it look like the car is bouncing along in a happy way? They drove all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses in different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. So they drank up all their pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. This is funny. Then it was hugging time. Talk about hugging. Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. They hugged us for hours. How do you think they feel about being there? I would agree, Gage. I think they're very happy. Then it was into the house and so much laughing and shining faces and hugging in the doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front room. Those relatives. And finally, after a big supper 2 or 3 times around until we all got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk and we were in 2s and 3s through the house. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras. So a few squeezed in with us and the rest slept on the floor, some with their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. It was different going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. The relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden and they fixed any broken things they could find. They ate up all our strawberries and melons, then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. Look at all the neat things they're doing with their relatives while they're staying there. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging and eating and breathing together. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia at 4 in the morning. We stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road, then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet. We fell asleep. How do you think they feel about saying goodbye to their relatives? Can you tell by the illustrations? Can you make an inference? The author doesn't tell you how they feel, but I think you can make an inference by what you know and by the illustrations. And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses in different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about the next summer. I love this book so much. It reminds me so much of some relatives I have that live in a place that looks very similar to that. And I hope you enjoyed this book too. I suggest you get a lot of books by this author because Cynthia Rylant is really a great children's book author, and I think you would like them all. All right, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye, Allie.